What's your name?
King Lou.
They call me Cookie. My mother died when I was born, and then my father died. I never stopped moving.
It's the getting started that's the puzzle. No way for poor man to start.
You have a cow.
First cow in the territory.
This ain't a place for cows.
Well, it's no place for white men either.
I sense opportunity here.
Good Lord, give me another.
I'll give you 6 ingots for that last one.
I taste London in this cake.
We have to take what we can when the taking is good.
Seems dangerous.
So is anything worth doing? A royal cow.
And yet she barely produces a thing.
Some people can't imagine being stolen from.
Let's hope he's one of those. We got a window here, Cookie. History isn't here yet. It's coming, but maybe this time we can take it on our own terms.
Lovely. Thank you. How nice.
Kelly, welcome. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yeah, I
Hi.
can.
This is Gabriela. I'm the festival director, and we just really wanted you to have this moment of an audience applauding your work. I bet it's been a long time, no?
It has been. Wow, I'm really delayed, but
Yeah.
the film played for 1 weekend in theaters, and then we closed for the, so it's lovely to see people in a theater. Yeah. Even
Well,
masked.
This is just a small sample to kind of get the people excited for the national premiere. So we're really thankful to the distributor Avalon that helped us do this, and we're really thankful to you for carving out the time.
Sure.
We know that you're about to start filming, and I really don't want to ask too many questions because I want the professionals here. We have a great team of people that are going to be asking you questions. I just wanted to quickly tell you a little bit about the format. So. There's going to be a series of brief interviews with the Filmoteca española, Carlos Reviriego, who's here to my left, and then Jara Yáñez from Caimán de Cine, and then also Marta Medina from El Confidencial, and you'll be able to see them at all moments. It's all going to be in English. And then we're going to pass to questions with the audience. We'd love to get the audience to ask some questions. We have a lot of young filmmakers here and people that would really love to ask you some questions about screenwriting and about your process. And we'll talk about First Cow as well, but most people here have not seen it, so no spoilers. And
Okay.
We just want you to feel at home and comfortable. So I'm going to just start out with the first question about some of your roots and when the moment where you realized that you really are a filmmaker and that this is what you have to dedicate your life to. Was it a slow process or was it a very clear one?
It's ongoing, I would say. Discovering you're a filmmaker, I guess I'm, I guess, it's hard to think about your own life like that. But a slow, I had a desire to make films, certainly. And there's, you put all your world and energy towards that end. But there's also just, I enjoy the study of film, and I enjoy now teaching film, and which is very close to studying film. And keeps you studying film. And yeah, so it's just a sort of thing you can, it gets me, I live a very kind of mundane life, and when I make a film, you go out and you have a real experience, and it's very different than day-to-day life, and you're in this community and dealing with all the sort of small politics of a world, and which is often what the films are about. And so, and then, I edit, and that teaches me a lot about directing, and it's just something you can never really completely conquer. The learning is forever, and so that I like a lot, and it feeds teaching, and teaching feeds filmmaking. And so, yeah, it's feels like a very fortunate thing when you can pull it off. And it always feels like, oh, we got one more made, and, obviously we'll never be able to do that again. So.
That was the last one.
Yeah.
We try to encourage the filmmakers that present their work to our festival to really try to find their own voice, which I think that people connect with your work so strongly because over the course of so many films, it's clear that you have your own voice, and you read in a lot of the interviews how people describe it. But I was wondering if you could take a stab at trying to describe, if you recognize your own style in some way, and if you could put words to it.
Yeah, well, you do at a point look back, and I think it's just to say for young filmmakers, it's fine to walk in the steps of other filmmakers for a while or whatever. We're all influenced by other makers of whatever it is. That's how art gets made. But there is a point where you realize that you inherently end up telling a certain kind of story again and again, or that you have a pace that is your own, or a certain you just look back at your films and you see, oh, I guess I do that, but I should expand. And then also you see what, sometimes I, will fantasize that I can, make films that are not so linear and not so formal, but I'm not, it's just, I'll look at Guy Madden's films and be like, I wish, that just seems so great to be able to not follow such a linear line and be able to work with montage in such a way. But it's, and then you just realize that's not how your brain works, and that's not necessarily accessible to you. So, you learn what you do, and you learn somewhat your limits, and you're constantly pushing up against those limits, but then things repeat often. And something just, like anything with practice and getting to do things, is that you become more comfortable with your own choices and your own voice, and it feels okay to let your mistakes be your own, and to feel,
Absolutely, thank you. Well, there's a lot of people that want to speak with you, so I'm gonna pass on now to Carlos Reviriego, and we'll loop back in at the end.
Okay, great.
Hello, Kelly.
Hi.
It's a great pleasure having you here. Thank you very much for your time.
Nice to meet you.
Thank you very much for your cinema, and congratulations for First Cow. Really one of the greatest films last year.
Why'd you have to add that? Why'd you have to add that last part? Kidding. Go on.
Well, in a sense, Cow brought me back to a very important film for me when I saw it, and I guess it's also a very important film for you, which is Old Joy. And it brought me back to that film in the way that, well, you portrayed a tender relationship between friendship of men, of male friends, and the kind of intimacy that you create between these characters, between the actors. I wonder, how do you get to establish and develop that intimacy between them, both in Old Joy and now in First Cow?
Just to say, First Cow comes from a novel called The Half-Life that was adapted from a novel of Jonathan Raymond's, and it was the first thing I ever read of John's. And when I read it, I wrote him and I asked him if he had any short stories, and he sent me the novella Old Joy. And so that was our first thing that we met during making that film. Yeah, there were similarities. I mean, I try not to think about Old Joy too much. I found myself in the forest of Oregon again. And so I said, oh, wow, yeah, I've been here before. How can this not look the same? But in the Old Joy friendship, it's two old friends that are discovering they don't have a lot in common anymore. And in this case, it's two strangers coming together and building a friendship, maybe out of necessity for a while. So it kind of takes a opposite path, but both films do deal with the ideas of masculinity and such questions as that in a forest environment. But really, in both cases, making a film, the kind of films we make where you're outside and you're in the weather, these things are maybe like being on a camping trip together. And when John Magaro and Orion Lee, the two actors in First Cow, met each other when they came to Portland for the first time, and we immediately got them into their costumes and then sent them out into the woods with a survivalist for a couple of days and it pouring rain the whole time, for them to sleep outside and learn how to build fire without matches, and to skin a squirrel, and to do the various things they would have to do in the film. And I think we do this sort of in lieu of rehearsing, so that when you're doing the scene, it's quite fresh, but they've had this experience together where they're quite intense for a few days, where they've gotten to know each other. And it was a little easier in this film because they get to know each other as they go on. And as we're Old Joy, they really had to be in this old friendship, which was a little harder. But likewise, they're making a film together and they're in a car together all these hours of the day and walking through the forest together. And there's so many down moments in between when you're actually shooting a scene. People get really close on film sets really quickly, or kill each other. It could go either way, but feelings can be very extreme. So it's yeah, and a lot of it I just think is the what the actors bring to it. John Magaro and Orion Lee, those were, it was a good chemistry there with those two. They're really different people, and as the characters are. Some of it's like you just don't know till you're there and you're hoping it works out, There's like no knowing until you're in it.
Yeah, well, there's something common in your cinema. You're discovering during the process, a lot of things. But something that you pre-decide, of course, is the format, the aspect ratio that they decide to film. And in this case, as very similar to Mixed Cutoff, you choose like a square format, like 133 or 137. And I
Yeah.
would like to know in which basis do you decide this along with the DOP?
Both films I shot with Christopher Blauvelt, and it's one film at a time. You're thinking of the circumstances, and Meek's Cutoff, I had been looking at a lot of Anthony Mann films, William Wellman, Bud Bedecker, and these films. These filmmakers deal with the 1/66 frame, and it's really, we call it the square, but it's just a smaller rectangle that allows you. It's a more intimate frame, and for Meek's, I thought it worked well with the presenting the women who are in these bonnets with no peripheral view. It also has a really economical, practical aspect to it if you're making films on a low budget, in that I had these people traveling across the desert, and if you're going 7 to 12 miles a day, you could, in a widescreen, you would see what's coming tomorrow. And there's so many elements of having to surprise them. And so it's a way of keeping you with the family and let them experience the landscape as they come into it, as opposed to letting the viewer get ahead of where our pioneers were. And in First Cow, it was quite a different reason. It was more just a visual thing of, I'm in an old growth forest with vertical trees and a lot of vertical lines, and I'm going to be spending time in these cottages. And in certain ways that I just wanted to shoot things, certain scenes that I could make more use of having headspace than a wide space. And again, there's an intimacy to the frame that I like very much. But you kind of decide it, and it's probably, some of it is just, the 133 is the attraction to 16 millimeter and getting used to that frame. And even if you're not shooting 16, you get attached to a frame you're used to.
Well, because I believe you make films on 16 millimeters during shootings, just to, I don't know, to exercise.
First Cow wasn't, though. Yeah.
Could you share what these films in 16 millimeters you do are about, and if you have any idea to share them in the future, to show them?
The 16 millimeter films?
Yeah, I read that you, between shootings, between films, sometimes you film in 16 millimeters.
I did recently, just for studying something that I'm working on now, and it was just was kind of stuck during writing, and I wanted to know how some artists were working in a studio and how the small things of what they do. So I went in. I won a grant so I could buy some film, and so I went and shot some 16, which was nice. And I did some with Chris there and some without Chris Blauvelt, and it was cool because the stakes are very low. And so when I'm shooting, sometimes if the camera's moving at all, over the years I've gotten very I like, if the camera moves at all, Chris Blauvelt is behind the camera. He's a great camera operator. But it was fun just to be able to not feel like I couldn't fuck anything up too much, and just let myself realize like I've gotten really, like, haven't just moved a camera myself in a while. I'm usually like only behind the camera if it's static. And it's just nice to do that and see what your own, less skilled, which really circles back to teaching, and why I like to edit films, is it, like, if you're working with students, there's a danger in feature filmmaking. You can get really far away from, you're not recording your own sound. You have a camera person, you could get far away from the actual hands-on filmmaking. And it's nice to just touch the apparatus sometimes. And
Well, you dedicate the film to Peter Hutton. Why? It's the question. And do you feel linked as a filmmaker to this great American masters of experimental film, or that generation in a sense?
Peter Hutton was, the first shot in First Cow is actually an homage to Peter. It's a barge shop. Peter shot on ships, and a lot of his films take place in the ocean. Peter Hutton, I was a colleague of mine at Bard College, and a filmmaker who I greatly admired, and he taught landscape classes at Bard College, where I teach. And I had the privilege of teaching with him for a decade and having dinners with him and going to his house and sitting on his couch and watching his reels, as he called it, of his films that he would just play on a 60 millimeter projector. And he's just a great person, as a lot of people at Bard are who aren't narrative filmmakers. It's great to be in a conversation with them about film and get notes from them that I wouldn't get from my more narrative oriented friends when I'm doing a cut or something like that. And so it's just a way to think about film that's not as completely in the vein of how I make films or how I approach films, but there's some, Peter's films are all about letting you spend time in a frame. His frames last for as long as a reel of film lasts, a magazine, which he had never understood digital, because he was always like, how would you know when the shot ends? And so, he's just about, here you're living in this frame that he's picked out for you, and giving you time to see and observe and have discoveries in the frame, as opposed to being a filmmaker that sets the frame up to specifically show you something. And so there's, to a much lesser degree, some of that in my filmmaking. And I could never tell what a Peter note would be. I could never guess what he was going to say. And that's like a great person to have, to be able to get feedback from, which is sorely missed, for me.
Well, thank you very much. I think it's Jara's turn.
Thank you.
Hi, Kelly. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, you too.
I love your work and all your films, so it's a pleasure to have the chance to speak to you. And I would like to make you some questions about your film path, about your trajectory, and specifically about the way your cinema talk about some kind of reformulation of some film genres. I'm thinking about the road movie that is not possible in Wendy and Lucy, the Western revision in Mix Kutov and also in First Cow, or a broken thriller in Night Moves. And I want to know why are you interested in this kind of reformulation? Why and how do you think about it?
Again, usually it's just one film at a time, but I maybe some of it is opposite of a filmmaker like Peter Hutton, who starts, has a completely blank canvas. If you're dealing with some sort of genre, there's a structure for you to play off of, and there's like a form that takes place, in the viewer, whether they know it or not, is already coming with a known sort of sense of where things are supposed to go. And really, probably, even whether you realized it or not, you probably have a feeling after 30 minutes that the next thing is going to happen, probably a viewer that's not interested in thinking about filmmaking. Probably by a lifetime of watching narrative has a narrative. I don't know, maybe YouTube has undone all this and you can't count on it anymore, but intuitively has an idea of where things are going. And so that's, if you subvert that in any way, you know, you can do it in a way that is not necessarily like, you know, different than a shock of like slaughter and guns and whatever it is, blowing something up. You can do it by not having the cut come where you think the cut would come, or having the point of view being the point of view that you could do it through filmmaking and a manipulation of a shared expectation that we all have when we watch narrative films. And so that's interesting to me. And maybe it's a way of not starting with a completely blank page, because, yeah, you know, there's some tracks to step into, and then there's things to break away from. So, yeah, maybe for both of those reasons.
And I think your main characters used to be outsiders, people who live outside capitalism and consumerism and more traditional American way of life. They practice yoga, they are activist ecologists, they look for a better future somewhere else. And why do you build your characters this way? Maybe are you trying, I think, to show the reverse of the American dream?
Not so much the reverse of the American dream, more sort of the mythology of the American dream, and who, well, let's just say that idea of the American dream is probably different for what different people have different ideas of what that is. But the general myth of the you can pull yourself up from your bootstraps if you just have enough initiative, if you just aren't lazy, if you know, it's all there for anyone to make their way in America. I am interested in that mythology because that while there's so many things, so many structures in place that make it really only available to a certain slice of people, and mostly the people that already are the haves and the people that hold power, whether that's for reasons of gender or economy or race, and not just that the door, and also the structural things that hold people captive and keep them with all the initiative from being able to break forward and move ahead. And so the film, in the same way that it's trusting, you know, working with sometimes in a genre or a mode of storytelling that is well known in a film sense, in a sense of cinema, the themes are counting on that there's an agreed upon idea of what the American dream is, and that it's available to everyone, and then fighting back on that premise, and in the framework, in a frame that's sort of maybe doing the same thing.
Okay. I want to know, what do you locate most of your films in nature and outdoors? They are usually forests or deserts. And could it be maybe a projection of the spiritual laws and always the way they find themselves, the characters, there in these wage spaces?
I mean, quite honestly, in the beginning, shooting outside was really a practical, economical thing. You know, I just started that way because I couldn't really afford to get into places or to light them. And I worked, with teeny crews. So we were always using natural light and shooting outside. And it's really how I learned to shoot. It is outside, and I set my stories around things that were and looked for stories that were set outside. And then this, and a lot of times, like you mentioned, the people I'm talking about aren't homebound, and sometimes they are living, somewhat outdoors. So, I mean, you could do a person can search for themselves in all different kinds of way in a city also. The idea of, I really like going off and shooting in more private places where you could just get into it with your crew. I mean, shooting in a city, well, the main city, I think of as New York, because that's like the city, but like the idea of shooting in the city is, I mean, I don't know. I used to think it was like an impossible thing, but maybe anything's possible, I guess, because it would certainly be different. But yeah, I don't know. It really depends on the story you're telling. And it happens that I work with this writer friend that I've been collaborating with for a long time, Jonathan Raymond, who is from the Pacific Northwest and writes about the Pacific Northwest and writes for, he a lot of it has to do with his stories. And I did a film with the stories of Miley Malloy, and she writes about Montana. And so we shot in Montana. So, in the search of what to do and what you want to do next and what seems topical, there's also always a practicality built in with my filmmaking, because I work with really small budgets, and a lot of that draws me to into the wilderness.
Okay, I don't know if it's also a question of budget, but you always, your films speak about friendship, and you always work with a group of regular collaborators. Do you speak about Jonathan Raymond, with whom you co-write most of your films, but also the cinematographer Christopher Blauvelt, the actress Michelle Williams, Todd Haynes, and Neil Coop as producers, even Lucy, your dog. Do you understand the creative work as a collectivity work, or why do you repeat always with the same collaborators?
Well, you have to work with people that are very willing for this kind of filmmaking. But Christopher Blauvelt took me quite a long time to find, and we've been working together since Meek's Cutoff. And if you have a cinematographer that you have a good language with, like my main interest in filmmaking has to do with the frame and how something's shot. It's like something you don't want to give up. Like when I think of how I want to make a film, I want to call Chris and talk to him about it. And I want to be in the trenches with him, because the cinematographer really, in a lot of ways, sets the mood for a set as much as the director. They're very, get people. People like working for Chris, and that's really great. And he's just a guy who wants to get you what you want and make what you want better. And he wants to come into your world and see things the way you're seeing it. And that's like a big gift if you can find it. A lot of cinematographers are not great collaborators and want the director to just go work with the actors or something. But Chris is, he likes getting in it with the director, and he really wants to get a director what they want. And that's a rare bird in my what I have experienced in filmmaking. And so, and then, when you work with people over and over again, you're not starting at the beginning every time you make a film. You don't have to have your first conversations about how you think about color or shadows or darkness or all these fundamental things. It's a continuation, and that's so great. So like if you're making films like we have been sort of kind of regularly for a while, it's like one long conversation. And same with assistant director Chris Carroll, who I've made like 5 films with, who works with the background a lot. You're not starting at the beginning with how you move things through a frame or anything. It's just ongoing, and a lot of it's a given. So it's nice having that ongoing collaboration with people.
Okay, that was my last question, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marta from Confidencial. Thank you very much. And I'm about to faint, so if I faint, I'm sorry. I am a bit nervous. The first thing that really amazed me from First Cows was it was the first time I have seen a lot of Western films, but it was the first time I really felt like carried onto a time. And I could, I don't know, I could see the materials that were plausible to be used there, and how do they how did they dressed, and what were their costumes, and so I wanted to know about your investigation and how you used the materials and everything to make this reality. So I don't know, I don't know how to express this, but it was so plausible.
Yeah.
So I want to know about that.
Well, thank you for the question, because it allows me to talk about Tony Gasparo, the production designer I work with often, who says I never talk about him. But our team was, we're doing a lot of research really together on this film. And before COVID, a great thing in life is you go scouting and everybody gets in the van, and you have this time when you're in the van with your crew, and everyone is sharing their avenue of investigation, of research with each other, language, costume, props, costume design, and you're all like in a crash course together. And it's one of my favorite things, and which is not possible right now in making films. Very sad to make a film and not be able to be in a room with anybody, but hopefully that ends soon. But we, and it's really an entryway for the actors to be given these tools and say, like, here's what you have. With the film, the Western we did, Meek's Cutoff, costume designer Vicki Farrell, like, if it hadn't been for her research, I wouldn't have really known that she handmade all the clothes in the film and the dresses, the women. I wouldn't have known about the trade with materials and dyes. I wouldn't have known that the dresses could be colorful and patterns, and and that came through her research. And so it's a real there's the research you do when you're writing a script, but then there becomes a kind of, I build books that I share, one for the costume designer and the production designer and the different people, casting, locations. And then people start bringing you stuff, and it's really, it's great when it becomes like on a period piece, especially where you're really pressed and you really want to, there's like getting it right, but you're making a fictional film and there's always this question of artistic license, I guess. So, but some, to me, I know filmmakers that work in a way, like we mentioned Todd Haynes, who, Todd always says there's no rules, and he really likes an open playing field. And myself, I'm always start with okay, here are the rules of this film. there's no sunsets, there's no whatever vistas here, we're going to use pans and like, I like limitations, and same with the down to the tools we can use. Like, here's the things we're allowed to use for lighting. Here's the things I work well with limitations, and maybe because that's how I've come up in filmmaking, having so many limitations. But they're also they also give me like the world's I envy Todd's idea of just like, there's no rules. He's always kind of saying to me like, oh, you don't have to be so strict. You can, which I intend to loosen up later. But, if you're making, yeah, go ahead.
No, that was another question, because it's like when I see your films, it's like 40, 50, the optics is like the human eye, more or less. Not a lot of movements. The camera goes with maybe a little movement, trying to accompany the actors and so. So I see that there are many rules. So it is easy for you to maintain these rules, not to break these rules.
Yeah, well, especially because once you sort of set the rules, in a way, I'm setting rules, because if I don't make, it's so boring to talk about budgets, but economy is a part of filmmaking, like I'm going to order my lenses, and I don't have like a truck full of endless things, right? But it's also the economy that you're making a film about. Like, these characters in First Cow, for example, don't have much, and are living off very small existence, right? So it would be ridiculous for me to shoot them in some opulent way where like I have every, shooting them from every, that just wouldn't make any sense for them. So the economy of the shooting has to do with who they are. And as where we get into the chief factors world, who is more moneyed and has more, I allow myself, Chris and I, to, be a little bit more flamboyant with the camera. I mean, in the world of that, they're still living in a wilderness with like limited things that are accessible to them. And it's 1820. So I wouldn't, not that there was any movie cameras in 1820, so it doesn't really matter, but it would be weird to have a what do you call it? Drone like coming overhead, So, the movement in the, I was thinking of like it for the captain when he's sleeping, it was like, a movement of sort of maybe like a ship or something, or a clock that's a metronome that's keeping time while this crime's happening outside, the crime of the milk. So it really just depends on the scene, but it's not, again, for some reason, like boundaries are, I can work well in with boundaries. It's more when everything's open to me that I'm more frightened.
I also wanted to ask you for the processes. What I mean is, if we see First Cows, at some point we see like a tutorial on how to make a pie with milk. And then when you see Night Moves, you learn how to make a bomb with fertilizers. That's something that usually on films, directors don't spend time on the process. It's like we think about making a bomb, and then the bomb is made and we use it. So I wanted to ask you about why it's so important for you to show the process.
Unless you think of like the Sec or something, like someone who's like in Rafifi doing a break-in, and you're going to see every little aspect of, or Man Escaped, I have the spoon and I'm making the rope that I'm going to get out of the, and it's everything with film has to do with time and how you're expressing time, and you're either, expanding on things or you're consolidating. And the making of things and seeing people's routines and it's showing you how to like make a clafouti, but at the same time it's showing you like the skills that Cookie has and what he's passionate about, and it's showing you the elements of food that are available to them, and it's allowing for intimacy to happen, and it's expressing how an evening would be spent perhaps in 1820 and the sounds and time of that period, of what would happen. And it's just allowing for this two people that don't feel comfortable very often to have a space to feel comfortable in. So a lot of things are, happening at the same time. And it's different on every film according to like what they're, putting up a tent in Meeks or building a bomb or whatever it is. They all are showing a process. They're very process-based films, and which I don't know. I like watching people make things, and I like filming people make things, and so they like have, I guess they have a tutorial aspect to them, really, but hopefully it's doing more things at once, and there's something about getting into the minutia, whatever like the truth of the scene is in the small details and gestures, as opposed to in the big moments that, or like the big revelations that really the discoveries are in the smaller gesture.
And my last question is, I think your filmmaking has a very obvious political commitment. Do you think that I learned that your first feature was in 1994 and your second feature was in 2006, and it's a huge gap between two films. So why do you think it was so difficult for you, or is it so difficult for you to build up a movie and to enter not an industry that you want to belong to, but I mean just to make films, just to get the budget?
Make films. Yeah. It was not an open playing field. It really wasn't. And when I think of the language today, the extreme that we're at of, watching every word that you say, in the 90s, I would go to meetings and people were very upfront. Like, it's a negative. Like, we don't do women's films. It was like, oh, we're a woman filmmaker, and that's a negative. And you want to have a woman lead, that's a double negative. And you want to have a woman who's a person of color, that's a triple negative. People were very open about it, that it was, and in the, indie world of, the misogyny was rampant. Everybody's talks a very good game now, but it was and minds have changed and doors have opened, and I think in certain ways just how filmmaking, the expense of it has allowed it to become, put cameras in a lot of different people's hands and made it more accessible, but you still have to get your film out there. But there is hopefully this year of being locked in my house, was just saying with, having things like the Criterion Collection and all, just getting to see all these films that you haven't seen made by different kinds of filmmakers from around the world, people. But even I'm so surprised to learn of women and people of color making films in America that I didn't know about and didn't see. And now, I always wonder, wow, what would have happened if I would have seen that when I was 20 25, like what would that have, if there had been someone to look to like that, that would have been amazing and life-changing. But, it's, I don't know. I teach film and I've taught film for a long time. And when I started, there would be, like one woman for every 16 boys in the class. And some of that might have had to do with the places I taught. And I teach in a more diverse, place that's maybe, it's not that diverse, but it's more open to certainly a friendlier place for women. But half my classes now are women. And I either say, that's either a good sign or a sign that cinema is dead and men have left. And that's like, I'm not sure. But I think, it's I have witnessed a big change. I think it's quite different from the 90s to where we are now. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just really want to make sure we have some time for questions with the audience. And I also want to just make sure, this is actually a full house. We're in COVID time, so we have to have some distancing. But just so you know, this is a full house in current 2021. So, ¿quién quiere hacer una pregunta? Do we have time for maybe 2-3 questions? I know we'd want to be good about our time frame. So do we have time, Kelly, for a couple questions?
I think someone from A24 is like keeping the time.
Okay, so ¿quién quiere hacer pregunta? Aquí primero. ¿Qué pasa? Is this a different type of video chat for you? This format? How do you like it?
It's, for some reason, instead of being able to see the audience, I have a big shot of a square of my face. So I keep trying to look around, I can see you, but I can't see everybody. But, it's kind of a miracle, right? To be able to, I'd rather be in Spain, but it's kind of a miracle to be able to, just that I can even, this can even happen is kind of crazy, right? But I like everyone. I'm pretty zoomed out. I'm looking forward to real world coming back. But I couldn't be happier than to see people in the theater today.
I go. Hi, Kelly.
Hi, how are you?
Thank you for being with us. Kelly, there's something really beautiful in your films, and it's the way they feel for me. I have noticed, I think that's mainly, or in great part, because of the craft of the sound design. I have noticed you give a lot of priority to the elements of the soundscape as well as to the elements of the industrialization, to make this great and terrifying encounter between these two things. So, I don't know, it would be great if you can tell us about how do you approach the sound design with Leslie Schatz in particular in your films?
Yeah, the greatest thing is if you can, be out in front and getting the sounds you want when you're shooting. It's very hard to shoot period pieces now, sound-wise. It's hard to find quiet. It's hard to make quiet films that are really more strenuous in a lot of ways because there's nothing to hide behind, and it's a noisy world. In these forests where we're shooting First Cow, there's just a plane going over. It was something like you couldn't get through a 30-second piece of dialogue before another plane came. And you really become aware of how noisy the world is if you're trying to make a quiet film. So that all has to be created later. And Leslie, I've done several films with, and Leslie's a great artist and works very quickly and sort of set the idea of where voices will be in a movie versus other sounds, and so the design is completely set and done with Leslie. And then after being in Leslie's chamber, I have had the last couple films been able to do a very lucky thing, which is go into some different theaters around New York and listen to the film play in the theater. And I can't afford to go back to Leslie after that. So, but I did that. I went to like 3 or 4 places and listened to the movie. And then I came out to Portland and worked with a young man who's got a small studio here, and he works on commercials mostly, but he's interested in films, you know, and he would give me a lot of time. And he and I went through and we take out all the crickets and the birds in the design and go through and place every bird and cricket sound for every scene. Every bird is like meticulously placed, and it's the proper bird that would be in this area in this season for any bird watchers. So I don't get shit from bird watchers, but having that sound mixes happen very quickly, like color timing, because they're really expensive, and and it's really dense, and you are in a sound perfect space that probably for First Cow, First Cow played for a weekend in theaters, and then COVID came, and then everybody went to their televisions. So you've done all this work while you're shooting and all this post work with this ideal in mind of how people will see and hear the film. And then they're looking at it. I mean, I walk around the neighborhood at night and I look in people's windows at what their TVs are set at as far as brightness and color, and you're just like, oh shit, and sound. But to go and be able to listen to your film in different places and then go back in the sound mix is a really great thing and a tricky thing, but also to be able to sort of, have this time with Leslie, and then also be able to go and do a less pressure-filled thing after everything's been set with Leslie was a good process. I mean, actually, it was very hard at the time, but ultimately good.
¿Alguna otra pregunta? A ver, aquí, en el centro. Y luego tú. ¿Y alguno más? Aquí 4. A ver si nos da tiempo para estos 4. Okay, we're going to try to speed question here. Let's see if we can get through to some more. This is so exciting. I'm also very proud of our audience's capability to understand and speak English. This is great.
Yeah, because my Spanish is nowhere.
Okay, hello, Kelly. It is a pleasure
Hi.
to be here talking to you. So for me, Night Moves, it was a really surprising film in your filmography, because even if I see a lot of elements of the thriller in your films, in this one, I think you play with those elements more explicitly. So what do you think about this genre, and do you want to make another thriller like this one in the future?
No, I mean, probably not. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to know, you go like a film at a time, like comes to you what you want to make. I don't know if I would go so deeply into, I mean, that was really like the most genre I've gone. Like that was really like even with Meek's Cutoff, which is a Western, there's a lot of different ways that film could be put together. But Night Moves really had to be like, here's a scene and here's the next scene and this is what happens next. And some of that is like very pleasurable. It's actually kind of fun. I don't know. I mean, it's funny. I did some scenes in Night Moves, like I was trying to be the Coen brothers or something, where I shot some scene. I knew when I was shooting, I was like, I'm never going to use this, but it'd just be so fun and to cut together. And it was really fun. And then I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm not really allowed to like, I just can't, it doesn't work in my film, so I have to take it out. But, you know, so it's fun to sort of try those things and do those things. There's also something, I don't know, like a story really has to lend itself to justifying going so deep in the tracks of such a worn, and I thought in that case, like doing this environmental thriller was like a nice place for it, you know. But it really just, I don't know, like I like in my dream world, I wish I could. I'm a very linear filmmaker, and I wish I could, you know, grow into being less so, but who knows? I don't know.
Okay, thank you. The next question down here, Ovid.
Hi, Kelly. Nice to meet you. Thank you for talking to us. My question was about how do you work on set? Like, how many people do you work with? Like, you talked about, like budget limitations and so on. And I wanted to ask you, like, how is the energy on set? How do you usually manage? I guess it depends on every film. But yeah, I wanted to know more about it.
Yeah, it depends on every film. I mean, Old Joy was like a crew of 5 and 2 actors and a dog. And Wendy and Lucy was, I think, a crew of 13. And Meek's Cutoff was like a crew of 50, I think. And then it just really depends. I mean, Meek's Cutoff was, Meek's and Certain Women were both such incredibly hard films. The weather was so rough. It was, I mean, on Meek's, it was like 110 degrees, and then it was like 20 degrees. And on Certain Women, it was 0 degrees. It's really hard. I don't know. It really depends. Like the mood, not to romanticize the mood. Sometimes the mood's been really shitty and hard. And just because you don't have enough, you're trying to do more than you really can afford. And so really, like with the producers, it gets hard. They're trying to keep us in the bounds, and everything's taking long. You know, it's really about time. And First Cow was by far the most pleasant filming experience because we shot 5-day weeks, which is the first time I ever did that. It was the first time I ever shot where I was like, could go home and think about what I was doing, as where in the past you just have to go on to the next thing and the next thing, and there's no time for reflection. And shooting 5 days weeks made a huge difference. And we were shooting in the fall, so it was like 30 or 40 degrees. It was manageable. It was like rainy, but who cares? You can dress for it. It wasn't like your hands are bleeding at the end of the first day, and nobody was like throwing food or anything like that. So it could get pretty intense, but the crew I work with, they're pretty good at going out. They drop me off and then they go out and do whatever they do, and they party hard, and they somehow come to work the next day. And I don't know. Yeah, they're challenging, but they're also like, if you work a really, really challenging day and then you're all filthy, dirty and wet, and you're in a van together and you're driving home during like on the desert, the most beautiful sunset you've ever seen together, and like nobody's talking. It's just like a incredibly beautiful thing. So like the hard is really mixed in with the good, you know. But there's this time of day at the end when you're about to lose light and you've been pushing all day, when the whole crew really gets in sync and the actors are in sync and everybody's at the top of their game, and you pull something off before the sun goes down, and it's just like it's a great thing. All the pieces are working together. That's a really great thing. And then there's other days where like nothing's working and you just feel so defeated. So, you know.
Okay, I think we have time for just the last audience question. Okay.
Hi there. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to the organisers of the festival for bringing us all together and all the great questions we've had so far. I just wanted to ask you a bit, because we discussed a little bit about how filmmakers find themselves telling the same stories, and you've certainly found your voice and have achieved a lot as a filmmaker. I just wondered, looking to the future, like what your goals are for your future projects and how you keep challenging yourself to keep yourself entertained as a filmmaker. What are your goals looking to the future in that respect, if you could share some of your ideas?
I'd never look too far in advance, because just whatever, I'm like, don't like to count chickens. like what are we doing now? I like having something to wake up and work on every day, and I don't really like openness of not having a project. But I like doing research, and I don't mind a long time of planning. I just that time after I finish editing a film and you're really exhausted from a project, and I always think I'm gonna just love that all right, now there's nothing, but I don't really like nothing. I like to know the net. I just like to have something to shape my day around and to work, and I like the process. You know, the next thing is just really what's in front of me. And I've never tried to work on more than one thing at a time. And, you know, I certainly have friends who most filmmakers have several projects going on at one time. And I do like during COVID, a weekly Zoom with a close friend of mine who's a filmmaker in LA, and we have dinner like once a week on Zoom. And I am always talking about the same project, and week to week, like he shuffles, like I don't know what project we're going to talk about with him, you know? But I'm very just like, I can only it's one thing, and like and I'm all in, and everything I'm reading is about that. And then the music I'm listening to is about, like, everything is in my world is kind of starts shaping this thing I'm in. And my writing partner, you know, our walks, our hanging out, our coffees become about that. And so, yeah, I don't really think beyond that. I don't want to hear about another project or possibilities. I know, like, I'll go back and teach for a semester when I'm done with this film I'm making, and I don't want to think about. I just want filmmaking. For me is just like what I'm doing right now, and what you know, the specifics of it, not like as a concept as a filmmaker of like what I'm going to do. It's not like, I don't know, I'm not that interested in it, you know?
Okay, thank you. I think we have to wrap up. Maybe you can give us a little taste of what you're about to start filming. Is there anything you want to share, or is this like a top secret environment?
It's nothing like I just, you know, I know I'll be talking about it after I make it for a year or two. And it's beautiful to have be in the discovery phase and be, you know, hold it sort of close to the vest, just to not say what it is before you can even discover what it is, you know. I'm really grateful to be with you all today. And I also want to thank the festival for having me, and thank you. I just appreciate people coming out to see the movie and having a venue to screen it in. And I hope everybody stays safe. And
Yeah, just so it will make you happy to know it will be on a lot of big screens in a lot of cinemas in Spain.
That's
it really
wonderful.
Will. I don't know if Avalon can tell us how many, but it's going to have a large, big screen life here. Yeah.
That's spectacular. Like, we haven't really had that yet, so it's really amazing. Yeah.
Vamos a dar un aplauso entre todos a Kelly, por favor.
Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You need to come. Next time you're here physically.